Hello and welcome to Views on News. I am Jawad Tehami. In a major development, the United States of America has imposed sanctions on 4 Pakistani entities, with its State Department issuing a statement. Let me quote: "The US is designating 4 entities for sanctions pursuant to Executive Order 13382, which targets proliferators of weapons of mass destruction and their means of delivery." Unquote. Now, Pakistan has reacted to this particular US move strongly, with the Foreign Office saying, let me quote: "Pakistan considers the US decision to impose sanctions on NDC and 3 commercial entities as unfortunate and biased. Pakistan's strategic capabilities are meant to defend its sovereignty and preserve peace and stability in South Asia. The latest installment of sanctions defies the objectives of peace and security by aiming to accentuate military asymmetries. Such policies have dangerous implications for strategic stability of our region and beyond. Pakistan's strategic program is a sacred trust bestowed by 240 million people upon its leadership. The sanctity of this trust, held in the highest esteem across the entire political spectrum, cannot be compromised. We also regret the imposition of sanctions on private commercial entities. Similar listings of commercial entities in the past were based on mere doubts and suspicion without any evidence whatsoever. While claiming strict adherence to non-proliferation norms, licensing requirements for advanced military technology to other countries have been waived off in the past. Such double standards and discriminatory practices not only undermine the credibility of non-proliferation regimes, but also endanger regional and international peace and security." Unquote. Without wasting a further moment, let me quickly bring in our esteemed panel of guests to talk about this important issue. For that, we are honored to have been joined in the studio by Ms. Naela Chohan, former ambassador, also former Special Secretary, Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Pakistan. Ms. Naela, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also in the studio, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Air Vice Marshal, retired Ijaz Malik, senior analyst. Mr. Malik, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Also on Skype at the same time, we are honored to have been joined by Mr. Syed Muhammad Ali, security analyst. Mr. Ali, thank you very much for your time, also for being with us on the show tonight. Really appreciate that. Let me begin the discussion with you, Ms. Naela. Let's first start with this particular move by the US administration. This is an outgoing administration of President Joe Biden. On 20th of January, a new president is going to take over the White House. How do you look at this particular move at this particular point in time, when there is an outgoing administration and one that is just around the corner to come in?
Well, it is a very critical time, and as you can see, a lot of things are happening. The outgoing government is trying to implement its policies as quickly as possible, because Mr. Trump's policies may not be in the same direction. So that vacuum is being filled, but this is a very hasty decision. It's a very short-sighted decision, and as you can see, the history of sanctions against Pakistan, they have failed, and they have actually backfired and affected US credibility, because if it is discriminatory, if it is creating imbalance, if it is creating instability, then the instrument of sanction itself becomes very questionable.
Right. Now, when we talk about, as you already mentioned, this is not the first time. During this particular year alone, there have been a number of earlier attempts of imposing such of sanctions on multiple entities, not only Pakistani entities, but also of other countries, alleging them of involvement in these practices. So the objective which has been explained in that particular move by the US officials is that it is not to punish. So what could be the ultimate objective as per your understanding?
Well, if it is not to punish, what is it for? A reward? Doesn't seem to be so. But the point is that the instrument of sanction itself is illegal, and it should not be levied by any country against any other country. It's simply illegal, and wherever they did sanctions, whether it was military aid or economic aid, it has caused more damage to US interests as much. And in case of Pakistan, you can see the first sanctions we got were in 1965, then we had in 1971, then we had in 77, Pressler Amendment, Glenn Amendment, all these amendments were coming, and every time they put these sanctions against us, it put US on a weaker wicket, because when in 1997, 98 on the nuclear also, when they did it, alhamdulillah, we did our test. We became more self-reliant. It gave us that ability to stand up for ourselves. So, actually it gave us more strength than weakness. So, whether they were, like you said earlier on in October and in July, they had other sanctions also against different countries for different reasons, but really the Americans should understand it's a wasteful and detrimental to their own interests activity.
Detrimental to their own interest. Mr. Malik, what's your understanding? How do you look at this particular timing at this particular juncture when there is an administration which is going out, which is bringing in such type of moves?
Normally, the outgoing administration at this stage, once it is even less than a month now left for the takeover in White House, they would normally focus on domestic issues, pending agenda points that they want to rush up before handing over the government. But unfortunately, this particular decision, as Ambassador Naela has mentioned, it's uncalled for at this time. Once the regional landscape and otherwise a lot is happening in such a volatile environment, why to create something additional which would not practically mean much. Earlier sanctions we have seen, these are obviously discriminatory in nature, and even now what they intend doing, it should be applicable. If the statement given by the spokesperson to be taken on its face value, then it should be across the board implemented to India, because our entire effort to go nuclear, not signing NPT and pursuing our minimum credible deterrence, it is under compulsion. Our economy, we never intended to challenge our economic constraints to go from the conventional capability to nuclear capability. It was forced on us. So why the sanctions only on Pakistan? That's the biggest question. So that actually reflects, if at all, towards their myopic vision to deal with this region, I would say.
Myopic vision to deal with this particular region. Mr. Ali, let's talk about this particular statement by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Pakistan's strategic capabilities are meant to defend its sovereignty and preserve peace and stability in South Asia. The latest installments of sanctions defies the objective of peace and security by aiming to accentuate military asymmetries. Such policies have dangerous implications for strategic stability of our region and beyond. Your understanding and elaboration regarding this.
Thank you for having me on this show. But I think let me first clarify that Pakistan is not new to these sanctions. As Ambassador Chohan just mentioned, Pakistan has the privilege of being the most sanctioned US ally in history. Pakistan was the frontline ally in the Cold War and also in the war on terror. But unfortunately, despite that close cooperation, Pakistan suffered a series of sanctions aimed at dissuading Pakistan from developing a strategic capability which is primarily meant to serve as a guarantee for peace and a credible deterrence in this region to thwart and prevent any external aggression, primarily from India. So that is very first aspect. The second aspect I must clarify as well is that since Pakistan's missile program is a success story based on our domestic resources and the hard work and brilliance of our scientists and engineers, any type of sanction will and has never affected the credibility of our deterrence and the capability of our nuclear and missile program. The third aspect is, but it is unfortunate because, like Ambassador Chohan also pointed out, these are the last few weeks of Biden administration, and it seems as a unthoughtful, irresponsible act aimed primarily at appeasing New Delhi, because in India there is a growing concern because against building up China, the US is becoming increasingly demanding from India to have a more provocative behavior towards China, while the Indians have not been very keen on provoking China as much as Washington expects them to be. And this seems to be, a signal to New Delhi that we will promote Indian interests at the cost of Pakistani interests in this region, which obviously indicates and raises serious questions and concerns in Pakistan regarding the commitment of the US towards the lasting goal of maintaining peace, strategic stability, and balance of power in South Asia. Because in contrast to Pakistan's impeccable non-proliferation record, in contrast to Pakistan's very responsible strategic behavior, we see that a couple of years ago, India fired a cruise missile, BrahMos, which landed in the heart of Punjab in Muridke, and thankfully did not lead to any loss of life. We also know that a number of incidents have been reported in Indian media that fissile material was being sold in scrap in some Indian shops. We also know that Arihant, which is the ballistic missile nuclear submarine of India, met several accidents purely because of the irresponsible and unprofessional behavior of Indian naval sailors. So all these things, plus added with the poor command and control, poor safety security record, and a very ambitious long-range ballistic missile program, which could aim at not just deterring India, deterring China and Pakistan, but eventually aims at deterring the US itself, are some stark and critical realities with Washington in its own national security interest must not ignore. And I expect and hope that the incoming Trump administration will undo these mistakes being made by the outgoing Biden administration and review these measures so that the international community can improve its trust in the US credibility towards its non-proliferation objectives, its commitment towards peace and stability in this region, and also an evidence that it is also, it desires close and cordial relations with Islamabad.
Right, rightly, you have mentioned a list of those things which have happened in the recent past when it comes to India's poor command and control at that particular misfire of that BrahMos, and then the sale of that fissile material over there within India. Despite such a long list, why such a discriminatory behavior? You already mentioned one thing, that for its own national interest, the US should not be overlooking all those things. But why is the US doing so? Could you elaborate a little in detail on that aspect?
I think there are two possible reasons for that. First, as I mentioned, I have noticed, and let me recall the recently concluded the strategic dialogue, the Chanakya strategic dialogue, which was held in New Delhi, and there was clear acrimony and tension between the Indian military leadership and the US experts there, because the Indians are getting worried that the US is becoming more demanding from the Indians to have a more aggressive posture towards China, far more than the Indians want themselves. So I think this outgoing measure seems to pacify the Indian concerns in order to ensure that the US will be sensitive to Indian interests. The second factor is also an unfortunate reality that the Indian lobby is very active in Washington within the Beltway, and they continue to try to influence the US administration in order to increase US pressure on Pakistan and shape policies in a manner that they are based on appeasement of India and bring coercion against Pakistan. But I'm sure our brilliant diplomats like Ambassador Chohan and so many of her junior currently serving colleagues will definitely engage the US and persuade them that such measures are unthoughtful. They raise serious questions about the credibility of the US non-proliferation commitment in the fair and equitable approach towards non-proliferation goals, and also it undermines the very close relations that Pakistan has had with Washington, and it also undermines the US commitment towards maintaining strategic stability and peace in South Asia.
Right, Mr. Ali, please stay with us. Let me take this point to Ms. Naela. You already, in your earlier take, talked of discrimination. Now, discrimination, is it being meted out towards Pakistan, keeping US's national interest in sight and to just appease India? Or is similar sort of discrimination happening in other parts of the world as well? Are there any other precedents?
I would look at it at a bigger picture, because United States of America is at this moment the kind of government Biden government is. Their focus is more on Middle East, more on Israel. So I think that, I mean, recently USA has also imposed sanctions on India. 400 companies, 19 companies and 400 entities have been sanctioned Indian because of their alleged involvement in sale of arms to Russia in the Ukraine war. So it seems that their policies are not consistent, and perhaps they have more fears vis-a-vis Israel, because Israel is at this moment under threat with these missiles. So perhaps the US vision is rather distorted when it comes to South Asia, because Pakistan has always very clearly stated that neither our nuclear arms nor our conventional and strategic defense is geared to any other part of the world except deterring the instability caused by Indian arms race in the region. So I think that they are basically confusing apples with oranges.
There was an expression earlier used by Mr. Ali that Pakistan happens to be one of the that US allies which has been sanctioned the most, despite being the front line ally in Cold War as well as in the war on terror. Pakistan had to lose so much, actually sacrifice, especially when we talk about that war on terror. Now, when we talk about this particular move at this particular point in time, how do you think it's going to affect overall trajectory of the bilateral relationship between Pakistan and the US in the coming days?
At this moment, I would say it's rather premature to state anything, because the new government will be coming in another 4 weeks' time, and Mr. Trump may not necessarily follow the same agenda. he has categorically stated that he will not be supporting any wars. He wants all these things to be settled before he takes his office. So, their vision may be different. However, Trump is very much focused on trade wars. He is talking about tariffs. He is talking about China, US, antagonism in the field of trade. So, Pakistan is now being seen by the US as China ally, rather than remembering that we were part of CENTO, we were part of CETO. We had to leave those because of our disappointment in the American commitment to us as an ally. We were also non-NATO ally in Afghanistan. So, they have been taking somersault when it comes to commitment to Pakistan, and they say that Pakistan is not a reliable ally. Actually, we are more reliable than our eastern neighbor, who they have made part of as Quad, and yet India is selling arms to Russia. So, I think the policy makers in United States have to now seriously look at this region, because it will have repercussion on them as well.
Right, Mr. Malik. Now, Pakistan already had done so much. The disappointment as far as the fulfillment of commitment on the part of the US is concerned, Pakistan had to leave CETO and CENTO, as Ms. Naela Chohan has mentioned, and then the kind of situation that developed in Afghanistan, what was expected from the US, we didn't see that happening. How do you look at these moves actually affecting the overall trajectory of the Pak-US relations?
Our relationship have been checkered. It is more on the side of American policymaker, and that they very frequently would revisit their partnership, so to say, with Pakistan. And whenever they thought that our relevance to serve their interests in this region is diminishing, or its strengths are relatively weaker, they would take that decision. I mean, in the same time frame, they were we were pursuing, obviously now it's a part of the history, that we were pursuing our nuclear peaceful nuclear program before 98 as well. It culminated into the detonations in response to India, but our coal tests and other things were going on. They kept quiet on that as long as they had their higher objectives in this region, which were in their reckoning being best served by Pakistan's involvement. But as soon as there was that objective in Afghanistan was achieved or near completion, we were hammered with Pressler amendments. So this is nothing new for us, and they gauge their instruments of sanctions and other things in relevance to their higher objectives. And I would again take from what Ambassador Naira has mentioned, contrary to that, India has been very proactively pursuing non-aligned movement, but it had defense treaties with Russia at that time, USSR, and it has been taking advantage of her foreign policy arrangements with during Cold War era from both sides of the globe, from the Russian Soviet camp as well as American supplies, and they used their relationship against us in 65 as well as in 71 war, once such things were more needed, crucial for our strategic survival in those conflicts. And India now is doing the same. India is taking all the advantages of their positioning in this region as the American China containment policy, and at the same time it's using her relationship with Russia as well, the arms supplies and then import of oil, whereas Pakistan somehow has not been able to Pakistan has been very cautious. You know, we would, if we are with China, we would go our relationship with Iran. You know, much needed energy in the pipelines coming from Iran, and we would take, you know, that as per the, we would look through our set objectives through the prism, you know, which has been put forward by American policymaker. I think there is a lesson in that for us also, that if India is very openly pursuing her national interest, and in the terms of the regional context as well as even beyond region, I would say. So Pakistan should also focus on her national interest and realign itself, take advantage of whichever. We should not be part of any camp. We should take a policy which should be very dynamic. We should take advantage of regional you know, happenings to, but unfortunately we have been through a lot in past almost 30 to 35 years, but we have never taken any advantage of sacrifices in terms of human lives, or, you know, our alliances with the others. We have had, you know, very I would say U-turns in our policy towards our neighbors, Western neighbor for that matter, on behalf of American policy objectives. And what have we gained? We have had almost 140 billion loss to our economy. So I think we need
the one word that you used in this particular take, the lessons.
Yes.
That is exactly where I was about to come. Let me take this particular point, the word of lessons towards Mr. Ali. Despite so many disappointments and the discriminatory behavior on the part of the US towards Pakistan, despite Pakistan being so much on the front in different endeavors, doesn't it call naturally for us to introspect and reflect and re-strategize ourselves when it comes to this particular foreign policy front?
In terms of lessons, there are three lessons which I'd like to share. First off, I think the non-proliferation regime is just one aspect in which Pakistan has been a victim of discriminatory behavior from the US. Let me share with you three other policies in which the US approach towards India and Pakistan has been equally, if not more, discriminatory. Human rights, I'll cite. What is the situation in Indian occupied Kashmir? Over 100,000 people have lost their lives. Do you ever see US State Department expressing concern about the human rights situation there in Indian occupied Kashmir, or about the situation of minorities inside India? But whenever there is an individual isolated incident, you hear that they are concerned about the human rights situation in Pakistan. That is the other aspect. The third aspect,
this particular take of yours, like it does not even bother to include India's name into the list of countries of particular concern when it comes to the treatment of minorities within India. Please go ahead.
Indeed, indeed. And let me quickly add two more points as an evidence of discriminatory behavior. I think Ambassador Naela Chohan also mentioned that India is the biggest arms market, and India is the biggest market of the nuclear exports of Russia. There are 22 reactors operating in India right now, which are of Russian origin, but none of them are under US sanctions. But in case of Pakistan, we have been a consistent victim and target of diplomatic coercion and pressure. Now, the third aspect is energy cooperation. While Pakistan is pressurized that Pakistan should not import energy as part of the Iran-Pakistan gas pipeline, but in case of Chabahar, India is the biggest investor in Iran, and their bilateral trade with India and Iran is many times more than that of Pakistan and Iran, and then US has no issues with that. So these are three examples. Fourth issue is terrorism. US knows very well how many terrorist outfits India is sponsoring through Afghanistan against Pakistan, but the US turns a blind eye. So all these four policies need to be seen in totality to have a more comprehensive and realistic assessment of the reality. So, but let me again on a positive note say that since our missile program is
here as well, I would like to add one quick point over here as well. The last point, terrorism. We've recently seen the glaring examples of India's state sponsorship of terrorism, not against Pakistan only, but on the US soil as well as in Canada. And those
indeed,
incidents.
so that's what I'm saying. But in terms of the missile program specifically, I want to end on a positive note before I beg leave that since our missile program is indigenous, such sanctions will not affect it in any way. Our nation needs to be proud and confident of that. And secondly, we should also not overreact, but we should try to use diplomatic channels to persuade the US that such thoughtless actions undermine its own credibility, and the new administration should review it. And I am sure that Trump administration will review such blunders in the greater interest of US own interest and regional peace in South Asia. Thank you.
Mr. Syed Mohammed Ali, security analyst, joining us on Skype. Thank you very much for taking time out for Views on News tonight. We really appreciate that. Ms. Naela Chohan, do you expect any sort of a review or the reversal of such type of moves when the new administration of President Trump takes over?
I'm not quite sure. I'm not quite sure because Trump has categorically stated that he is not going to support any military assistance to anyone. Anyone is a very ambiguous term, but in case of Pakistan, perhaps the military assistance will not be as it was before, and the sanctions have come at a wrong time, in a critical time. I would say there is no wrong time, but it's a critical time. And at this moment, their being levied on us may perhaps be continued by the future government. I'm not very optimistic about it.
Okay, let's talk about this particular stance of Pakistan, long-stated position that Pakistan has always sought a non-discriminatory global regime on non-proliferation that is principle-based, inclusive and underpinned by the cardinal principle of equal and undiminished security for all states. Keeping in view this particular thing vis-a-vis that particular executive order, this particular statement by the State Department, the executive order 13382.
Yeah.
So how do you compare both of these two, the stated position of Pakistan, and what are the major provisions of that particular executive order?
Pakistan is basically I think the Foreign Office has done a good job in rebuttal, because this order has raised certain concerns on the basis of which it has decided that sanctions should be levied against Pakistan. And the Foreign Office has stated also that earlier on there have been sanctions on Pakistan which were unfounded, without any evidence, without any basis, just on certain apprehensions. And the same attitude is being perpetuated now, which Pakistan has rejected, because whatever concerns the United States might have, whatever the order states, it is not applicable on Pakistan, because Pakistan has always adopted a policy of principles, and we have even if we were not signatories of NPT, we had self-imposed moratorium on these things. So, we had categorically stated that we are ready to sign NPT provided India does so. But until then, we had self-imposed moratorium also, which no country would do. So, Pakistan has always been very principled in its position, and we will continue to do so. And we hope that the new government in United States will respect that, and our relations may be further strengthened. But as far as sanctions are concerned, at this moment I think it's too early to predict.
Right, Mr. Malik, now that executive order 382. That particular provision, that clause in this particular, the section 1A2, under which these sanctions have been made. Now, by looking at that particular state position of Pakistan, that Pakistan wants a non-discriminatory global regime on non-proliferation that is principle-based, inclusive and underpinned by the cardinal principle of equal and undiminished security for all states. How do you compare both of these? Isn't there any sort of an alignment what the stated position of Pakistan is vis-a-vis that particular executive order?
It's not only the stated position, but our conduct itself, our history, that we have been very open to international inspections, which has endorsed our highest safety standards. Secondly, our very robust command and control system. I mean, we have just discussed this BrahMos incidents and certain other failures on their part. But Pakistan has been very, clean of any such allegations, which should, if there was any, indications, that should be actually discussed. And if there is a need to use the instrument of sanction, that should qualify a country. This Mr. Ali mentioned about Indians' stance or Indian, collaboration on energy, for example. I recall I was in Washington in 2010 for strategic dialogue, and that was the time that the nuclear civil technology treaty was signed with India. And I raised this question there, and they said that these people on Capitol Hill, they are very sensitive about democracy, and that's why they are little more inclined and comfortable with India. I said that right now we have democracy in our country as well, and our democratic government is facing acute shortage of energy. So this is a time that if you want to see stable democracy in Pakistan as well, support this government and support the people of Pakistan. And as you know, they are a very good listener, and they just would shrug away any logical argument. So that shows the contradiction even in this particular statement of declaration of this sanction. They say that Pakistan continue to be our partner. So isn't it a mockery of diplomatic norms that you say that we are partners and we are allies, and then you oppose sanctions also, whereas the next door neighbor it is doing whatever they want to do, enhance their capability of arsenal, both conventional as well as nuclear. And their capability, for example, of ballistic missile is around 500 kilometers, and if at all this alleged involvement or procurement of parts is concerned with ballistic missile, our range is doesn't bother anybody else other than India. So why should America be worried about that? That's the question. I think this should be, and I must appreciate again, as the cost of repetition, our Foreign Office stance, that they have stated in unequivocal terms and categorically, candidly, that our program, our effort to maintain deterrence is purely for our concern of stability and our own
security here in this particular region.
Stability.
So, Mr. Ali, in his view, also mentioned of Indian lobby being very active over there, but he also commended the efforts which are being put in by the diplomats over here from Pakistan as well. Where do we need to re-strategize? You already mentioned of having a very dynamic foreign policy. Where, keeping in those lessons learned.
My frequent interaction formally in my official capacities and privately also meeting people and opinion makers there, I think we terribly lack in cultivating our lobbying resources there. We should pursue the objectives which serves strategically to our state interest and as well as interest of our people.
To where do we need to strategize? What needs to be revisited and implemented?
We need to enhance our influence create and maintain. There is a disparity in Washington DC, the policy makers, the opinion makers, the think tanks, the interns in White House and State Department, you know, they are almost all these lobbies, they are filled with Indian youngsters, and we do not see any Pakistani faces there. So that is first thing. We must avail all possible opportunities, send our youngsters there, which are very capable, and they can play a role of a catalyst to revive our or project our national interest in the power circle of the world.
Right, Ms. Naela, what needs to be done? Mr. Ali also commended the efforts put in by the staff of the Foreign Office, the young diplomats who are in service right now, and already commendable services rendered by people like yourself. Where do we need to revisit and re-strategize?
I think we have to strategize at different levels. One is G to G, the other is B to B, and the third is the diaspora. As mentioned by my illustrious colleague here, Indian lobby is very strong, Indian diaspora is very strong. Of course, in percentage they are much more than our Pakistani origin Americans there, yet Pakistanis are also pretty well placed, they are very well educated. They can play that role of bridge between our two countries, because since our independence, USA is one of the countries we have had the strongest bond. It's very well founded relationship. It's unfortunate that it became checkered and more transactional, but it is more than that. And there's so many layers in our relationship that it cannot be simplified by just a few sanctions. I hope that good sense will prevail.
Ms. Naela Chohan, former ambassador, former special secretary, Foreign Affairs, Ministry of Foreign Affairs in Pakistan, thank you very much for your time, for being with us on the show. And Mr. Air Vice Marshal Retired Ijaz Malik, senior analyst, thank you very much for your time also for this insightful discussion today here at Views on News. We really appreciate that. With that, we come to the end of today's episode. Till the next one, take good care of yourselves.